As far as the business goes, we were very fortunate in that we got a part of the right network of people. It was a real estate network group, and people within that network just wanted to use the same property management company everyone else was using. That's how we grew from 0 to 260 doors in 18 months.
You're listening to Flip Empire, the show committed to helping real estate entrepreneurs who want to build their empire without sacrificing their life. Your success and freedom starts now with your host, Alex Pardo.
Welcome to episode 762, where I am interviewing my new friend, Chris Tighe. Now, guys, Chris is not only a husband and father to two awesome boys, but he and his wife are both retired military. Chris served 23 years. He served our country proudly in the Navy with 5 deployments, 1 Green Beret in Afghanistan, 3 ship deployments, and an aircrew deployment. And I wanted to start today's podcast because I have so much respect and admiration for the men and women that serve our country proudly. Chris and his wife have both done that. And guys, Chris has a fascinating story. When you talk about taking a quote unquote hard pivot in life, and by following your vision, by trusting your gut, like following faith, Chris is the perfect example of that. And on today's podcast, you're going to hear, I think, an inspiring story about going out and taking a leap and betting on yourself, stepping into the unknown. So if you've ever experienced uncertainty in your life, and I'm very confident to say that every single person listening to this show has experienced uncertainty in their life, you're going to want to listen to this podcast episode from moving across the country to starting a business from scratch, selling that business, moving again, starting a new business in the midst of COVID. It's a very inspiring story and one that I think you're going to extract a lot of value from. So with that being said, guys, I'm encouraged and excited to introduce you to Chris Tighe and to have you listen to this podcast. So without further ado, let us dive right into it. All right, guys. So I am back with another masterclass here on the Flip Empire show. And Chris, the gentleman I'm about to introduce you to is a new friend, somebody who I recently met in a mastermind community that I'm a part of. And you guys, if you've been following the show for any length of time, you know just how much I value community in general, and just being around people that are going to inspire you, uplift you. I'm fascinated by people's stories. And as the more and more I kind of get to know Chris, I just had the opportunity to be on his podcast. So we will definitely talk about that and include the link to his show in the show notes. I just have even that much more respect and admiration for just his journey. And I really want to get into a couple of things that I think entrepreneurs and real estate investors in general are faced with, and yet they allow fear, uncertainty, sometimes an identity crisis hold them back. And number one, first thing to know, Chris is just an awesome man of faith, husband, father, served our country proudly. So Chris, thank you so much for your service, man. I really appreciate
My pleasure.
everything that you do. And, as we were kind of prepping for the show, one of the things he mentioned, so Chris sold a property management company when he and his wife lived in Washington, and they made the transition, and now they live in Houston, and launched and started elevation construction from the ground up. And, Chris said, hey, as we were talking about the direction of the show, he says, well, we could talk real estate and construction, but I'm not a construction guy. I'm a real estate guy. And that really, really resonated with me, because if you've heard me talk in the past about one of my favorite books, The E-Myth, it's about that very thing. It's the difference between being a technician and a manager versus being the entrepreneur. And Chris, I think, is an embodiment of that. So, Chris, with all that said, man, I know I gave you an introduction, and now with what I just said, man, dude, welcome to the show.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. It's so cool to be here. Talk to you again. I know we just talked on my show, but it's cool to continue the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Selfishly, like that's one of the benefits of being a podcast host, is that I get to ask questions I think the audience would want me to ask, but then selfishly, I get to ask questions I'm curious about.
Sure, yeah.
So, man, I want to start this particular podcast episode and launch on exactly what I just touched on a few minutes ago. You and your wife had a property management company, which, by the way, like I've never operated and run a property management company, but I've dealt with enough property management companies to know that, at least from my perspective, it appears and seems to be a pretty challenging business, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of moving parts in property management. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go out and try to launch a property management business. So you guys, how long did you run that business for back in Washington?
We only had that business for 2.5 years.
Okay. Two
Two
and a
and a
half
half
years.
years. Yeah.
So what I'm curious, like what made you get into that business in the first place?
Well, to set the scene a little bit, when the idea came up, we were living in Massachusetts,
Okay.
and I had retired from the military. I had done my time in the police department, so I was working as an operations director for a church, and I was overseeing the facilities management, the buildings, and this and that. Um, Went through a period of time like, hey, we were talking earlier about identity. Like, hey,
Yeah.
I need to do something else. I need to pursue what's in me, right?
Mhm.
I read a book by Erwin McManus called The Last Arrow, and that was the catalyst of like really drawing it out of me.
Okay.
And long story short, I had a summer of panic attacks where I thought I was having a heart issue, but it was just panic attacks. And what it was is God was just shaking me, saying, "Hey, look, I gave you this vision for a reason. Oh, you need to pursue it. I'm not going to tell you exactly everything that's going to happen, but here's Z. I need you to go to A, and then I'll reveal B, C, and D as you go along this journey." We were
Yeah,
talking
man.
about that during my show, right? And so, I remember after that whole episode, my wife and I sat down with my pastor, who was my boss, and his wife, and I said, "Hey, look, I don't know what's going on with me. I don't know where I'm going to go or what I'm going to do, but I'm going to give you 6 more months, and then I have to leave, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do just yet." So he accepted that. Within that 6 months, an opportunity popped up to move to Seattle and open up a property management company with a friend of mine.
Okay.
And so my wife and I said, okay, that's what we're going to do. That's the opportunity presented to us. We sold our house. We got rid of all of our furniture. We put what we could into a couple of cubes to ship to Seattle. We drove our cars to a dealership. We said, hey, we need to sell our cars because we're catching a plane to Seattle. So we sold our cars at the dealership, got on
Wow.
the plane, moved to Seattle, moved into a small apartment. And then we started Pacific Rim Property Management in January 2020. And so that's how we got into it. And then over the span of, I think it was about 18 months, we grew, we focused mainly on multifamily, and we grew from 0 to 260 doors in 18 months.
Incredible. Incredible. But and by the way, we'll get to this in a bit here, but I think I heard you say you started this property management company outside of making a huge shift from Massachusetts and flying across the country over to Seattle, Washington. I think I heard you say you started the business January of 2020.
Correct.
And something happened the year of 2020. So
Yep.
we're gonna go ahead and put a pin on that, and I'm sure we'll get to it. But
Sure.
further,
Sure.
a lot to unpack there. I want to peel back the layers a bit on the panic attacks that you were having.
Yep.
When you said that, I could relate to a certain degree because in this particular episode isn't about me, but I'll just to so that you can relate to me even that much more.
Hmm.
Um, I experienced something somewhat similar right before my first daughter was born. I think I was starting to feel the pressure and the responsibility of bringing a child into this world and what that meant. And I
Right.
remember driving at one point and I felt like I had like a 45-pound like weight
Hmm.
on
Yep.
my like a plate on my chest. And I thought I was having a heart attack. I told my wife and I said, let's just go to the hospital and check it out. And sure enough, I was having a mild
Yep.
panic attack. Nothing it seems like to what you were dealing with. And there was a lot of blessings and lessons that were
Yep.
learned from that experience. In your particular case, man, how did you deal with having panic attacks? I love the way you
Hmm.
framed it in saying, "Hey, that was God shaking me." Because
Yeah.
as we talked about on your show, I'm big on perspective, and you chose
Right.
to see that as, "Hey, God is shaking you. Like this is the vision."
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Talk to me about that season of life you were in, where you were experiencing these panic attacks, and now looking back on it, what you've learned from it.
Yeah. So I was in a good job. It was great people, great organization, and there's no reason to hate it or want to leave. It's just some, you have something else you want to do, and you felt like you should be doing.
Mhm.
Um, and so my wife was very supportive, and we were having these late night conversations of like, hey, just quit. Let's go. Let's do this thing. Let's do this thing. We'll figure it out as we go. But I was always afraid because I was married and had two kids. Um, I forgot I felt like I was going in a different direction with this question. What was the question again?
Yeah, no. So I'm curious, like, take me back to that season of life you were in,
Yep.
of what you were experiencing with the panic attacks, and like, at what point did you choose to see it as a blessing, like God shaping
Gotcha.
you, and how'd
Yeah.
you kind of deal with that? Like, just man, because panic attacks can be a very serious thing, and it
Yeah.
sounds like you came out on the other side of it stronger. So I'm just kind of
Yeah. Gotcha.
I'm looking to kind of extract from your experience the wisdom and how you dealt with that and how you overcame some of those challenges.
I think the blessing is that I was in a good community. I was working at a church. My boss was a pastor. I was in a very strong small group. And, I would, in that small group, we were open, we were vulnerable. We were sharing things that, like, hey, I'm struggling with this or that. And so I was just sharing my experience with everybody. Initially, we all thought it was a heart problem because I remember when I first had it, it was a week after I ran the Boston Marathon. I'm like, I just ran a marathon. How could I have a heart problem?
Mm,
So I go to the ER, and as I'm driving to the ER, when you have that bit of a scare of, you could die or something, whatever could happen,
yeah.
then all these small little things don't matter anymore. Right. So death is the ultimate thing. Like, that's the end here on earth. So I'm thinking about that. And as I'm driving to the ER, and I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going after what I should be doing. I'm going to quit my job, and we're going to go after entrepreneurship. And so that I didn't know at that point that I was just having panic attacks. And as I was going through it, because I kept having these issues with my chest and my breathing and stuff, what I found was, as I was starting to feel those feelings come on in my chest, but I was having a conversation, a purposeful conversation about something else. It
Mm,
got my mind off of what I was feeling. Those feelings went away. The pain went away. And I'm like, okay, well, if I can change how I'm feeling in my chest by my thoughts, it's not a heart problem, it's a mind problem.
mm,
So I need to start working on this and get this going, or else whatever I do after now is not going to work.
that's
So
so
that's when
true.
I started reading a ton. I read a lot. Even now, I read 25 to 30 books a year. And it's primarily like, hey, where's my mind if I'm not thinking the right way? So really, to answer your question, it's community, being around the right people, being
Yeah.
influenced by the right people, and then also making sure your mind is in the right place and controlling your thoughts.
I love that, brother. I love that. It's not a heart problem; it's a mind problem. That's so
Mhm.
powerful the way that you phrase that, and I can totally step in and feel kind of where you were and where you're coming from there. So I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of value there for people listening to this. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward a bit. So
Yeah.
you packed up and moved from Massachusetts over to Seattle,
Yep.
started this business, right? We'll talk about the season in which you started this business, like right before COVID, and how you had to
Right.
like transition. I'm very curious. We'll talk about this in a moment, but I'm very curious just to plant the seed with you, how you navigated through the challenges of, hey, we're 2, 3 months into this new business, and all of a sudden it's like the world shuts down and we got mandates and masks and social
Yeah.
distancing and all this like craziness that feels like a zoo right now when you think back
Yep.
on it.
Yep.
And then eventually you end up selling that property management business and then
Right.
picking up and moving again. And now you live in Houston and you
Yep.
started a construction business. So I share all that and zoom out a bit because clearly, brother, like you and your wife are no stranger to like taking bold, massive action.
Yeah.
What empowers you? What gives you the courage to go out there and make such big leaps? And, I think people struggle with decision fatigue.
Yeah.
You obviously don't have that problem. At least I'm not sensing you have that problem. How do you deal with like what's the advice that you can share with me and with the audience when it comes to making big important decisions and then just like acting on it on what feels like a moment's notice, although I'm certain it doesn't just happen overnight. You don't just wake up and say, hey honey, let's move to Houston. I'm certain there's
Yeah.
conversation and prayer and talks, but like
Yeah.
man, you make bold, massive, decisive actions. How do you do it?
I think you have to be in tune with how you're feeling and where you want to go with your life. And if what you're doing right now is not in line with that, then you have to make some decisions. For my wife and I, and the other part is, like, if you're married and if your spouse is on the same page as you are, you have to listen to that. Like, if you both are sharing this desire,
Yeah.
there's a reason behind it. So take action on it. But if one is not ready, you kind of have to wait, I think. you know. When we were in Massachusetts before we moved, my wife is from there, so she wasn't really ready to move yet.
Mhm.
I was ready to move probably a couple months after I moved there, to
Okay.
be honest.
Okay. Yeah.
But after a while, she said something to me. I shared a desire, like, "Hey, I want to do this, this, and this." She goes, "Okay, but we can't do it here." I'm like, "Boom, we're both wanting to move. Let's do this." So that's, we moved to Seattle, and then we always felt in Seattle that it was just a stepping stone. Like we needed to go through this. It was like a military PCS. PCS is permanent change of station. You move every 2.5 to 3 years in the military. You go to a new duty station. So we treated it like it was a PCS. We were there to learn something, to grow in our career as entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
And we knew there was going to be something else after that. We just didn't know it until like 2022 ish.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. Hopefully that just the mindset I think that you're sharing with us is what I'm really taking away from this is that you zoom out. You're willing. I think Virgil has a quote that says, "Fortune favors the bold," and it's
Mhm.
not like you just make reckless decisions, but is it aligned
Right.
with your vision, what you want? Being in tune with like your feelings, your thoughts, your emotions. Like I'm hearing a lot of emotional intelligence, and just a lot of just in tune with frequency, vibrations,
Yeah.
vision, God's vision for you, like what you want to do, and just stepping into that. So,
Yeah.
man, I honor you for that. I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
I want to take a few steps back. Talk to me about like starting the property management business, and then boom, COVID. Like, how'd you navigate through all those challenges?
It was, I think the most difficult part was just the fact that we were in a very small apartment with two boys going to school and they had a homeschool. And just being in something very small that we were not used to because we came from a 4 bedroom house and just being stuck in there. As far as the business goes, I mean, we were very fortunate in that we got a part of the right network of people. It was a real estate network group, and people within that network just wanted to use the same property management company everyone else was using.
Yeah.
So that's how we grew from 0 to 260 doors in 18 months. And during that time when they were shutting everything down and you couldn't do this or that, and there's only certain people, I forgot what they called. There only certain people can be out on the roads and going out and doing stuff. I can't remember what it was. The important people.
Yeah.
Um, I just decided to myself, I'm like, well, no one has the authority to tell me if I'm important or not. I got a business to run and I'm going to do it. So
Amen.
I went out and did it. If a cop stopped me, I'm like, hey, I'm making a living, man. Like I'm trying, like I'm serving tenants, I'm serving owners, I'm making things happen, but no one gave me a hard time.
Yeah.
So that's just a mindset I had. I wasn't going to allow that circumstance to create some kind of fear in me. If anything, I was going to be a little rebellious towards it because I didn't agree with a lot of that crap. I thought it was ridiculous. In fact, I got "We the People" on my tattooed on my arm for a reason. And
Love it.
I'm pursuing happiness is what I'm doing.
Yeah. Oof, man. When you said I chose to be a little rebellious and I didn't like, man, like, it's like the more and more I talk to you, I'm like, dude, we got a lot in common, man. We
Oh yeah.
there's a lot of alignment here. So
Yeah.
that's awesome, man. Look, the takeaway is don't let external circumstances dictate
Yep.
your behavior, and like you can't control X and Y. Like, and I think so many people they allow their lives to be dictated by external circumstances, what's going on
Yeah.
around them, what's going on the outside, versus just like tapping into what they can control, and then
Hmm.
honoring again their vision, honoring. By the way, the other thing I hear from you, man, is that you're very intentional and thoughtful about the communities that you put yourself in, the people
Hmm.
that you surround yourself. And you
Yep.
said you grew from 0 to 200 and something doors because of the network and the ecosystem, the community you're in. So for
Right.
those of you out there listening that are kind of struggling, like, man, how do I get into real estate? Or how do I transition into commercial real estate and storage? Or how do I do X and Y and Z? Well, success leaves clues. And what Chris is sharing with you, I'm hoping you really latch onto. It's ask yourself and take a friend inventory, right? I'm
Hmm.
sure I got that from somewhere, but like
Hmm.
take inventory and stock of the people that you associate with and the communities that you're in. And ask yourself, are the communities you're in aligned with where you want to go and what you want to do?
Exactly.
You ever hung around really, really healthy people and you happen to go out to lunch or dinner with them? And I don't know your eating habits, but you look like a really healthy guy.
Hmm.
But I specifically remember years ago, I was hanging around 3 or 4 buddies that all really, really good shape. Clearly,
Yeah.
you could see them from across the street and be like, that dude, like he hits the gym. He takes care of himself. And I
Yep.
remember sitting down, and I'm somebody who I eat pretty decent, but I'm not, like, and I
Sure.
remember making different decisions
Oh, yeah.
when it was my time to order. And
Mhm.
it was such an epiphany for me. I'm like, this right here is a perfect illustration of
Exactly.
the power of surrounding yourself with. Had I
Mhm.
been with people that were overweight and just don't take care of themselves, I'm certain I wouldn't have ordered the salad. I'm certain
Yeah.
of it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Right.
And so, anyways, that story quickly came to mind. I wanted to share with you because I think it illustrates just the importance of immersing yourself in the right communities.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I met with someone within the carrot community. His name is Craig Seitz. He lives here in Texas, and we just met on Facebook. And he does things that I'm interested in. He's into bodybuilding,
Okay.
and so we're talking about doing. I'm thinking of doing a physique show maybe next year or something.
Wow.
And so we met up for lunch just to talk about it. And so we ordered our food, and they put chips right in the middle, and both of us are looking at it like, man, that looks good, but I'm having a conversation about physique shows, and we're not going to eat those chips. So
Yeah,
it
that
was
that's
like
it.
unspoken accountability right there.
Ooh, I don't think I've ever heard it quite put that way. Unspoken accountability. And that only happens because, like, again, if you were in front of somebody who you weren't talking about that, and maybe who had
Yeah.
no interest in that, you probably would have grabbed and shoveled a bunch of chips in your
Oh
mouth,
yeah.
you know?
100%.
Yeah, yeah. That that
100%.
that that's so true. Hey there, stop. I promise to get you back to the show, but let me ask you a couple of questions. Are you happy with the money that you're making in your real estate business? Are you generating any cash flow? Are you building wealth? Do you feel like you're making progress, or are you just constantly chasing deals and going after the next transaction and the next transaction? Well, I can tell you from personal experience that there's an easier way, and it's not with single family homes. I believe that self storage is the best asset class in real estate, hands down, because we're not dealing with tenants, toilets, there's automation, it's a recession resistant asset class, and it's a business that has the benefits of real estate. If what you're ultimately after is cash flow, building wealth, and time freedom, I want to invite you to just take a few minutes to apply. Go to www.storagewins.com, where you can learn more about our Storage Wins coaching program. And I can help you generate cash flow from your first storage facility within the next 6 to 12 months without needing to use your money or even needing any experience. So head over to www.storagewins.com. And if we like what you have to say, we'll schedule a call, and I look forward to connecting with you. Now back to the show. Man, so okay, you move over to Houston.
Yep.
What was it? Talk to me about the inspiration to start a construction company. Was it similar to when you were in Seattle, Washington, where you immersed yourself in the right communities and you had the opportunity to acquire all those doors? Like, what was the genesis of Elevation Construction?
Well, Elevation actually started in Washington.
Okay.
So we started property management January 2020. Elevation started March 2020 because our clients were asking, "Hey, do you know anyone who can oversee our projects? Because we want to renovate our apartment complexes." And so, rewind back in 2009, I was in Afghanistan, and I had to oversee the construction of our operations center. And so that's my exposure to construction right there. And I'm like, oh, that
Okay.
was kind of fun. That was kind of neat. So I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. So Elevation started March 2020, and I started with 3 one-bedroom apartments. Did pretty well with that, and expanded to where we renovated 10 apartment complexes in Washington. And so when I moved out here to Houston, that same network, they had 21 properties under contract here in Houston,
Okay.
400 something doors. So I came down here thinking, oh man, I'm going to be busy for the next couple of years renovating all these units. Well, every single one of those fell through. And that's when the economy started changing in 2022. And then people in the multifamily, they weren't spending as much money in renovations, very minimal stuff,
Okay.
not enough for me to create a business around.
Okay.
So I had to make this pivot from renovating apartment complexes. Now I'm pivoting to marketing towards homeowners who are staying in their home because the rates are too high. They
Mhm.
want to do kitchen, bathroom remodels, new additions, things like that. So we're still doing, I still have the company in Washington. We're still doing some work up there. And here in Houston, our focus now is home remodels. And now we're doing commercial. We just did a coffee shop, finished it last week. So now we do commercial work as well.
Incredible, man. Talk about a hard pivot. Was there ever any period of fear, uncertainty, self-doubt?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
how am I going to do this? How'd you talk to me about,
Yeah.
like, how'd you reconcile that internally? And
Mhm.
then again, I think the common theme here that I'm getting from you is that, like, you're very in tune with how you feel, but you certainly don't let that dictate your behavior and your action. So walk me through like how you were able to kind of just navigate that particular situation.
So I had to change my marketing. I had to change a lot of things. So what I did was I had to talk to a lot of people. Like, hey, how do I do this? How do I do that? That's when I really got into social media. That's when I really started my YouTube channel. That's when I started my podcast, Caffeinated Contractor. That's when I started getting into SEO because I needed to get, this is a new market I was marketing towards. So I had to do that. And that took a long time. That took about a year pivot, right?
Yeah.
And so that was a lot of like, gosh, am I doing the right thing? I'm not seeing anything yet. Should I go get a job? Should I just shut the doors or what? And finally things started coming through. And then what I did was just finding the right people who can do these jobs, who can manage the projects for me, who can do electrical for me, who can do this for me, who can do that for me, who's a good attorney for me. And now I've got the right people in place where my job is just like the conductor of an orchestra, is like making sure that things are being done in a proper time and stuff, and then documenting and creating the SOPs behind it and things like that. So it's a process, man. I felt like, gosh, am I ever going to get there and arrive to where it's like, I could just kind of coast? No, that's not happening, man. It's like ongoing. But I think if I ever achieved where I got there, I'd be bored and create something else.
Yeah, yeah. You bring up an interesting point, Chris, because I don't know that we ever quote unquote get there.
Yeah,
Because
I agree.
I in the past I'm a big goal setter, right? And you'd
Hmm.
set the goal and then you arrive, and then it's almost like that new car smell, right?
Yeah,
And then it fades away, and then what do? Like you plant your flag or you set your sights on the next mountain, the next goal.
yeah,
And I think goals are important, but what I also think is equally important is understanding how to appreciate the journey. And it's
yeah,
it's who you're becoming in the process of
exactly.
pursuing a goal and accomplishing a goal that truly is the value,
Yep,
right? It's the
agreed.
type of person that you need to become, the mindset you need to have, the actions you need to take, the adversity you need to overcome in order to be able to achieve X, Y, and Z goal, whatever that might
Yep.
be, right? It's the journey, not
Hmm.
just the destination. I think both are equally important.
Exactly. Totally
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. I want to start to kind of like end the show
Yep.
with this particular topic. One thing you've said a couple times, and I think I alluded to it at the top of the show, Chris, is that you're not a construction guy per se, even though you run a construction company.
Yeah.
You're an entrepreneur. You're a business guy. And one of the key assets of any business, in fact, some might argue that the most important asset in a business are the people.
Correct.
The people that run the business, right? How have you gone out and found the right people? Because the only way you can make a construction company work without you being the technician, right? The
Hmm.
guy swinging the hammer. And you kind of joked about the fact you don't even know how to use a hammer. And you're probably being facetious, right? But you know what I mean.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
How have you gone about, like, what are some of the strategies? What are some of the frameworks, the mindsets that you use to go out and attract, find, train, and manage really good people?
Yeah. So there's two things. One, you have the back office admin, and then you have the people doing the hands-on work. So the hands-on work, I sub everything out. And what I find is there's a lot of great people out there that can do excellent work. They love what they do, and they're really good at it. They just don't know how to do marketing. They don't like the business aspect of it. They just want to work. And so I'm a perfect match for them because I just like to find the jobs and give it to them.
Mm,
So as long as they do quality work, and we'll check on their work, making sure that they're within our quality and our standards, they're insured, they're a legit business, and they're willing to plug into our system, then they can work with us.
yeah.
So that's how we find our subcontractors. They come and go, but we do have a few. I've got one in Washington who's been working with me for 4 or 5 years now. So
Wow.
he's my guy, right? And so yeah. So as far as like hands-on guys, that's what I do for the local work. For my back office admin, everything is done in Mexico.
Okay.
So my whole team is in Mexico. For example, my permits are pulled in Mexico, from Mexico. Alma in Mexico does that. She talks to my architect. She talks to my engineers. She does all that stuff for me. Everything runs through Mexico before it gets to me. So I build my back office admin and support remotely, and then I have my guys locally to do the hands-on work.
Yeah, dude, good for you, man. Good for you. what's the vision going forward for you? Like where do you see elevation construction the next 3 to 5 years? Like what's
Mhm.
kind of the path for you and your wife moving forward?
So my vision has always been, how can I be a national brand?
Okay.
And so it's kind of hard to do that as a construction company because each state has got their own different requirements. And I'm
Hmm.
not going to go to each state and take a test. That's just too much and too hard. So what we're going to get into next, and we're applying, is to be a certified national contractor for the government.
Okay.
So we're going through that process right now. We should be done with it early September, where we can start bidding on government jobs in September. So
Incredible.
that'll fulfill the vision of being a national brand. So we could do construction work on all federal facilities. We'll still operate here in Houston doing residential and commercial, and we'll still operate in Washington.
That's unbelievable. And the fact that you served our country, I have to think that would help you, or
It does.
does that not factor in at all?
It does. So my wife and I are both retired military. We're service disabled veterans. So we do have there's a percentage of jobs that are just kind of put to the side for people with those designations.
Got it. Incredible, man. God bless you guys.
Thank
Chris,
you.
brother, I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. I want to
Thanks,
kind of
Alex.
give you the final word, man. Like, when you think back on your experience, right? Like in Afghanistan, you talked about being in Afghanistan in 2009,
Yeah.
and I'm certain you have stories and experiences from that. I can't even wrap my head around what that must have been like.
Mhm.
You talk about the big decisions you and your wife have made in your life, how you didn't necessarily allude to this, but this is what I'm sensing is that like you trusted God, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you just leaned into the path that you felt he wanted you guys to go in, and picking up Massachusetts across country to Seattle, and then Seattle to Texas, and then
Yeah.
like starting your companies and just everything you've done, man. You've made some pretty massive pivots, some big decisions. With all that experience under your belt, how would you, if possible, distill that into a bite-sized nugget for people listening? Like, what is the message that you would want people to walk away with from this particular show?
I would say be clear where you want to go.
Okay.
And Trevor talks about identity all the time.
Yeah.
Become that person. And that's a process. You're not going to be that person overnight, but it's a process. And keep moving. Do something every day to move the needle, no matter how big or how small. Move the needle. Like for me, like on a small day, easy day, like on Saturday, like, hey, what am I going to do today? I'm just going to write a blog that's going to help my SEO, right? So things like that. Just do something every day that's going to move the needle, no matter how big or how small.
I love that, man. Get 1% better each day. Have that mindset. Just progress, not
100%. Yeah.
perfection, right?
Yes,
Love it,
sir.
man. Chris, again, really appreciate you being on the show, man, sharing your value, your wisdom. Guys, thank you so much. This show does not exist without you. I always encourage you, make sure that you're subscribed if you're not, to the Flip Empire show so that you're notified every single Monday morning when new episodes get released. You guys have noticed I've been on a run for the last several months of just interviewing just awesome people, sharp entrepreneurs, sharp minds. And I feel like it's my job to try to extract all the wisdom that they have and try to put it to you on a silver platter so that you can just take one thing, apply the framework, apply the mindset to your particular life and business so that you can continue to elevate, grow, ascend towards your goals. So anything I can do to be a part of that journey, you reach out, let me know. And for those of you who have reached out regarding our Storage Wins coaching community, head over to storagewins.com and let's schedule a call. And with that being said, guys, look forward to the next show. And Chris, thank you once again, brother. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it, man.
All right, my friend, I hope you enjoyed that Flip Empire episode and got a lot of value out of it. Make sure to check the show notes page for any resources that were mentioned. And speaking of resources, honestly, I don't think I've done the best job of sharing with you my top curated, highly recommended tools and resources that I use in my business or have used in my business. In some cases, these are affiliate relationships with people that I highly trust and respect. And I know these tools and resources can help you and your business go to the next level. And as an ethical bribe, if you decide to try out one of these resources using my link, I will go ahead and send you an unadvertised bonus. I'll send you something of high value. All you got to do is shoot me an email, alex@flipempire.com. Go ahead and let me know that you that you tried out this resource, and however I can help you getting started with that, chances are that I know it very, very well and currently use it or have used it. So make sure to check that out, flipempire.com/resources. And if I can be of help or service to you in any way, just shoot me an email, alex@flipempire.com, and I will do anything I can for you. Have an amazing day, and I'll catch you on the next show.